everybody. I am AJ, and I am your host today. When we look around, we see injustice, death, children starving and dying from childhood cancer and congenital heart defects. We see humans in disabling pain, both physical and mental, or horrific birth defects that leave many unable to even care for themselves. We see homelessness, and even in the rest of the animal kingdom, we see animal suffering and inhumane treatment of animals in things like factory farming. Everywhere you look, there's suffering. And of course, if you ask a Christian, they will point to Satan. But God allows this. Can God not take Satan down? Or can he, but refuses to because he hates his creation? Let's discuss it. And dial 984-400-5656 because this is critical call. Hey, welcome back. Hey, John, how are you? Welcome to the show.
Thanks, AJ. Nice to be here. How are you?
Doing well, thank you so much. This is actually my very first time working with you. Like I've seen some of your content and streams where you talk to people about religion or um, counter arguments for religion. So, in case I know you brought a bunch of your followers, your fans, so I'm excited for that. But there should also be some people in the chat who may not be familiar with your content. So tell us a little bit about where to find you and what you do.
Oh, thanks very much. So yeah, I stream on YouTube and TikTok, and I think the YouTube is Jon Cohen official, I think, and something like that on TikTok as well. And yeah, it's exactly the sort of thing you said. It's counter apologetics, and really the purpose of my work is to legitimize non-belief. So rather than just framing it as just going out there and bashing religion, which is fun and worth doing, it's actually a slightly different mission, which is just to recognize that millions of people are made to feel that they are moral failures because they're not convinced of certain highly implausible claims and stories. And in our culture, this is framed as some kind of dereliction of virtue, that you don't believe this stuff, it somehow makes you bad and it makes you worthy of punishment. And I think that this is a really, really unfortunate view to hold, and so many people hold it. And so I wrote a book which is coming out later this year called Unconvinced: How Belief is Not a Choice and Why That Changes Everything. And in it, I'm arguing that if you're not convinced that a God exists, there's nothing you can do about that. You can't just decide to make yourself convinced if you're not. And so punishing that and treating that as some kind of crime worthy of the death penalty or eternal torture or whatever you think hell is not only unjust, it's actually morally incoherent because it's criminalizing a process that you actually can't control. So I'm arguing for the fact that belief is not a voluntary process. And it's quite obvious when you think about it. If you're not convinced, you're not convinced. And all you can do is leave yourself open to information, consider things fairly, be open-minded, listen to the arguments. But if you don't find them compelling, then that's where you are.
That's very true. And I think that is also a message that not just believers need to hear. I think it's something that even the skeptic community can benefit from. Because sometimes you see, um, I've seen conspiracy theorists within the secular community, right? Like people who believe like these crazy stories or these crazy claims that they come up with. And we need to realize that a claim is not the evidence. It's just the claim. Like if I go into my kitchen and I made myself a sandwich, um, and then I come over here and say, John, you ate my sandwich, but you're like, well, I wasn't really in the States on that date, and like somebody else comes in and they're like, well, you don't have any bread. You also can't eat gluten, right? So you can't really eat bread. Okay, there's a lot of gluten free, but my bad. Let's scrap that one. But like, there's no bread at your house. There's no ham. There's no cheese. Did you really actually make a sandwich? Did you order it from somewhere else? And then like look at your app and it's like, well, there's no evidence here to show that you order any food. So like it just becomes a claim that I just made up, right? Like, but the reality doesn't match with my
Yeah.
claim. So I think that's something that we all need to learn to look at in the skeptical community, in the believers community. It's really, really important to be able to differentiate a claim from the facts, from the evidence. So I appreciate your work with that. Back. We apologize for the gods striking the stream down. I don't know what god did it, but one of the gods, we just blame all of them, or none of them, or a combination
Yeah.
of them.
We clearly said the wrong thing and angered all the gods, and they decided to intervene and take the stream off.
I know, right? It was it was good timing, right? Because for somebody to be able to say, "Oh, it was actually the gods," because we just gotten started talking about God and how God hates His creation. So yeah, I think it pissed a God off.
For sure.
So
Yeah. We know that they're very easily upset, though, and they're very thin skinned.
Uh, yeah, very much into punishment, as we were just talking, as we had just mentioned, actually. So, yeah,
Yeah.
we were getting the punishment of being struck down, and so nobody could hear our message of um, distaste for the gods. So, we'll probably have to go back to the beginning of the conversation because I'm not really sure how much people heard about it. It's okay. We'll just wing it and start from um, the topic of the show, right? The topic of today's show was, does God hate his creation? And we had just begun to talk about examples of God's hatred for the creation. And generally speaking, the majority of people that we talk to are Christians. So we were talking about the God of the Bible and the very specific examples from the Bible, which are Noah's Ark, the Tower of Babel, and Adam and Eve, right? Yeah, wait, Adam and Eve, we were talking about the punishment that women received based on the actions of Eve, which led to Adam also taking some actions, but mostly women being punished because we were the bad ones. So you were commenting uh, on something really interesting that I wanted to dive a little bit more into, and we were talking about the rest of the animal kingdom,
Yeah.
non-human animals and their suffering. Can you maybe go over that again if you remember? If not, just re
Yeah.
say whatever.
Yeah. I mean, so many believers think that before the fall, there was no death. And if there was no death before the fall, that means that animals didn't kill each other. And if animals didn't kill each other before the fall, it means that all the exclusively carnivorous animals that we can think of, like great white sharks and lions, must have had a different diet. Presumably, these
Mm.
creatures were all vegetarian prior to the fall, and their entire digestive systems would have had to have been instantly reconfigured at the moment of the fruit crime in order to necessitate them now killing other animals in order to survive and have a diet, which is completely preposterous and obviously idiotically stupid. But that's what you have to believe if you if you are silly enough to say uh, that the fruit related incident ushered in death into the world, whereas previously it had not existed.
That's a really interesting point, because then you also have the fact that humans wouldn't have had to kill animals to eat, not just one animal killing another animal to survive, but humans wouldn't necessitate to have to kill animals or fish in order to survive. And there are some people that say that do look at those parts of the Bible where God says something along the lines of that He created all the fruits and the plants for humans to eat. but if I remember correctly, it doesn't mention animals, and a lot of people use this to say that humans were meant to be vegans. Now, I'm a vegan, but it's something I came to after I became an atheist, interestingly enough. So it wasn't based on the premise of what I was just discussing from the Bible. It was more like having conversations with people. For me, it started from my own health. Like I figured out that plant-based diet helped me with my chronic pain and other health issues that I was having. It hasn't cured them, but it helps me manage them better. And so the that led to lots of conversations with other fellow vegan atheists. I wasn't vegan; I was plant based at the time, and so we started having conversations about how the morality behind eating animals and using animal products and basically exploiting animals in any type of way, and that it's while it's not a moral imperative, like we don't have to be vegans, right? Nobody has to be. It's it's an approach that lines up a lot better with my own moral values. Like no two people are gonna have the exact same moral values. So what matters to me doesn't have to be what matters to another person. But it was I don't know. It's been a really interesting journey for me to going from like the idea that the Bible has of humans being above everything else in creation, and what you just mentioned, which I'd never thought about. So that's a very interesting connection of like how people see animals as inferior to human, and therefore we can use them for food and for whatever exploit we want to. Whereas apparently, according to the Bible itself, then if that did not exist, then that it means that for animals also shouldn't have technically existed. So that's a really interesting connection there.
Yeah, and the whole thing of separating out humans from other animals is itself a silly distinction. But of course, we are animals. We're all related genetically. We're all part of the same phylogenetic tree, and this actually applies to plants too. So if there was no death prior to the fall, you've got to wonder what was God planning for people to eat? Because even if you're just harvesting plants, well, you're potentially killing plants or plant life, right? So I don't know. The whole thing is a bit silly because we know that genetically we are all one big family, but God didn't know that apparently.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean when we look at other animals and we try to connect human morality to animal morality, it just cannot be done because humans, like as we were saying earlier, right? A woman doesn't know what it's like to be a man, but we also don't know what it's like to be an animal. We can study them, right? Science tells us that they feel the same type of pain, that they feel very similar emotions, that they feel that they have the same nerve endings that make human animals behave a certain way, right? Like, for example, if you have a cut on any part of your body, then that affects your emotions. You may be more easy to anger, more reserved, more quiet, and animals express the same type of behavior that we see in humans in pain when we assume that animals are also in pain. Um, but what's interesting to me sometimes about the vegan conversation is that people assume that vegans want zero harm. That will like, no, you cannot kill anything or eat anything or use anything that an animal provides for you. But it's more so about reduction of harm. I'm not a hardcore vegan. I'm not like a everybody needs to be vegan type of person. I'm like, if you can, if you're willing to, I support that. And I like to have the conversation with people just so they're more aware of their own decisions, right? Because you cannot make a decision unless you're well educated on why you're making that decision.
Sure.
Um, but like you're saying, killing other plants or killing insects in order to protect your plants. Like, yeah, I'm a vegan, but I'm also, if I grow my own vegetables in my garden, I'm gonna have to unfortunately kill the predators that are eaten by fruits. And so it's not like there's never gonna be a type of veganism that is zero harm, but
Yeah,
I can reduce the harm that I personally put out into the world myself.
sure.
Um, what about, for example, when we are talking about more complex things that show that God hated his creation, like the Tower of Babel, right? You're talking about a more insidious sort of action that God took upon his creation to make sure
Yeah.
that they didn't work together, that they weren't be able, that we wouldn't be able to succeed together for the betterment of each other. Like he was being very selfish in protecting just himself and like screw everybody else. How do you feel about that part?
Yeah, it's obviously a ludicrous story. That story frames God is essentially defining cooperation as something which is threatening to him personally. He doesn't want to see humankind cooperating efficiently with each other in case we get too big for our boots and somehow threaten his position, which, as an omnipotent being with knowledge of all events, seems a bit silly, ridiculously silly, in fact. But to really see, if you really want to look at perhaps the most perfectly distilled example of God's hatred for his creation, you need only look at the world now. Just look at the amount of suffering that happens in the world now. This is a conversation we have almost every time we have these our shows, because an all-powerful God would be able to mitigate so much of the suffering that happens in the world now. Every sick child, every starving child, 3 million children starve to death every year. Every Go and spend a day on a children's cancer ward, or children who are, or people who are just killed every day in random accidents, random occurrences. And God presumably knows about all of this and watches all of these events unfold with the option and the ability to intervene to stop them happening, but choosing not to. And the standard religious reply to this is always some variant of, he must have his reasons for doing this. He must have some plan which necessitates all of this suffering, and that's why it's happening. It's actually good. All of this suffering is actually good because it's going to lead to something better later. We had a caller earlier today who was saying that, every tear shall be wiped and everything will be wonderful afterwards. And the point is that if God has some plan he needs to execute or wants to execute, there's only two options. One is that he's not powerful enough to achieve his plan without that suffering, in which case he's not all powerful. And the other is that he is, but he actually wants the suffering. And if you look at the world today, if you believe in an all-powerful God, even if you accept that such a God would still be constrained by logic, right? An all-powerful God can't make a square circle or a married bachelor, but this is not a problem with logic. This is a problem with intent. Such a God would still, without violating any laws of logic, be able to intervene in the world to save the children who are being attacked by adults who want to abuse them, to save the kids knocked over by cars in the street, to save the animals who die in forest fires, to save the children who die from malnutrition because a harvest failed. And unless you think your God is really, really spectacularly inept and weak and incapable, you have to wrestle with the idea that God must be choosing this suffering, and that any future state of the world could be achieved without it, but he's choosing to have it with it. And that's just an unbelievable amount of suffering.
It is, and if you think about it, God, people point to Satan or like you say, the fall of mankind and Eve eating the apple and all of that for today's suffering, in a story that is 2,000 years old, and in which these things happened maybe I don't know, 3,000 to 4,000 years ago, right? The alleged 6,000 is the alleged birth of Adam and Eve, for example, right? For younger creationists, and they point back to Satan tempting humans with all of this evil, and that is why we have suffering. And it's a to me it's a really weird concept because you have this all-powerful God that claims to be able to take literally anything down and anyone down, and took all of creation down when, in Noah's Ark story, for example. He could easily take down Satan. He could get rid of their um, thing that is causing the suffering. He knows the cause of the suffering, and still allows for that to exist. So it's kind of like God Himself doing victim shaming. He's just like, well, you did
Yeah.
this to yourself. Like, you deserve it because you were doing XYZ, or not you yourself, but like your ancestors, your whatever relationship we will have to Adam and Eve, or parents, whatever, however far back that goes. And it's like, even within the Bible, you see wordings such as up to four or is it seven generations, then your children and grandchildren are gonna be punished for their sins of yourself. And it's like, it is a choice. It becomes a choice of God to punish someone's great grandchildren for the actions of that person.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not a fair God. That is not a just God that is after justice. He's after revenge. Revenge would be a much better way to describe that, in that way. It's interesting because for me, this problem of evil was also what took me out of religion. um, as I mentioned, my baby, when I was pregnant, was diagnosed with a congenital heart defect, and so we went home after the birth, and a couple weeks later, my baby had to have open heart surgery, and that was like the first open heart surgery. It was really hard, but like we had a lot of family who were religious, so we had family over to pray for the baby and all that stuff, right? Then several years went by, and in 2020, my kid was 9, and we came to the point where they needed a second open heart surgery to correct some more of these defects that they have. And I was just sitting there right next to their bedside after the surgery, the night of the surgery. And the nurses were trying to get my kid up to walk to the bathroom. And it was like so painful for them that my kid could not even do it. Like, barely taking a few steps was just impossible. So we get my kid back into the bed, and I'm just sitting there. It was like middle of the night. Everything was dark, and my husband was sleeping because he had to go to work the next morning. And I'm just sitting there for hours, and my kid's awake, and I'm awake, and I'm trying to talk and like calm them down. And my kid's just like, at one point was like, please don't talk because responding is painful. So I sit there in silence, and my heart was just breaking. Like, I didn't know
Yeah.
what else to do, other than just hold their hands and sit there. And at that moment, I was thinking about praying, and then that's when that thought just came to me, like, what exactly am I gonna say in this prayer? What am I
Mm.
supposed to say? Like, take away their
Mm.
pain? But this is the God that, like, I'm asking the attacker to take away the pain of the person that they attacked. And it's like, that's just not how that works. And that was when my cognitive dissonance began to like lift, and I was like,
Wow.
wow, okay, I can't pray right now. And so I didn't. But that was like what led me on the path of like going back to atheism and non-belief, because I was like, I can't just thank this God for this successful surgery because after what I witnessed. Like, how do I do that?
That's fascinating and heartbreaking. And of course, the credit for the successful surgery goes to the surgeon, right? And all the
Right.
medical professionals that trained for years to acquire skills and knowledge in order to be able to unscrew up what God apparently screwed up, right? Because if you think God's in charge of everything, then sorry, congenital birth defects are on God, right? Like he's in charge apparently. So I think I see that as human beings coming along to unbreak what he broke. I hope everything is okay with your kid now.
Oh yeah, yeah. I have a teenager now, so the surgery went very well. We do
Good.
yearly checkups. We'll do up for a MRI pretty soon because like they may need another intervention. But we're lucky. This is where we're so lucky to be to live where we live, right? Like the hospital that we go to is the number one in cardiac care, pediatric cardiac care in the U.S. And so the type of surgeons that we have, the type of care that my kid receives there is amazing. And when they did the last open heart surgery, one of the successes that we had was that they were able to put in a pulmonary valve that is artificial, right? Sometimes they use big valves, but sometimes they use an artificial valve called the melody valve. And so this artificial valve, sometimes they put a child-sized one, and so it needs to be straight up replaced the next time. But because my kid's natural valve was larger than typical, they were able to insert an adult valve. And so the next at least 3 interventions will be through a CAT procedure, which is not open heart surgery. And it's like just an overnight stay, a lot less
Fantastic.
painful. And so it's like, so these are like
Fantastic.
the scientific advancements that are like,
Yeah.
like these are human beings that do that type of thing, you know?
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's really amazing. That's one of the reasons I'm so into science too. So, because like I see, with my own cyborg type person that I am, like I can actually experience the medical advancements and like the scientific advancements that we see. Um, so, I thought we had a caller. Oh, sorry about that. No, it's they're. I think they're working on it. Somebody said they were gonna call. I thought
There
it was
were
ready, but it's not.
rumors of a call. Rumors of a call.
I guess so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'd love you to call in if you think that our claim that God hates His creation is being unfair, and we wouldn't want God's feelings to be hurt. Then call in and explain. We would love to engage with you about that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I have an interesting question. Um, for you specifically, right? Since you were raised secular and you've never been a believer or anything, and obviously you cannot fake being a believer. You cannot just make yourself believe something. Is there anything like what will it take for you to believe that there is a God? Is there anything that will convince you, or is it really just like
Yeah.
unfalsifiably?
I think the answer I will give is the one I always give, because as you can imagine, we get asked this a lot. My answer is I'm not really sure what it would take, but God would know. So if there is an all-knowing God, He would know exactly what would persuade me, and there would be some package of evidence at which point I would say, yeah, I mean, clearly there's something going on here, right? I've invented little experiments, like, I have a 20-digit number written on a piece of paper. If God can tell me by some other means what that number is, no one else can know what it is because it's hidden away. No one knows what it is. I know what it is. That would be really impressive. If you can spell it out in the stars, even more impressive. Like, all of these things would be data points. Whether that would actually get me there or not, I'd certainly be paying attention at that point. I'd certainly be paying attention.
Yeah, for me, it's the answer will be sort of very similar, right? Like God knows what it will take for me to believe in that God, right? So even if this God can present me with that information that makes me believe, I still wouldn't feel, because of what we just talked about, I still wouldn't feel that that is a good God, that is a a God worth worshiping, right? So I wouldn't feel comfortable worshiping that God, even if I were to believe that He exists, right? Because I can believe that my neighbor, let's say, is convicted of several murders, right? Just a hypothetical. This is not wrong. I hope. But anyway, like I can believe that they are, right? But at no point will I be obligated to be this person's friend, or
Mm.
right, like I can believe that something exists, but it doesn't mean I have to follow that person to
Of course.
participate in that.
Yeah, and this is why framings of God not being willing to reveal Himself because of free will are nonsense. Because God could reveal Himself, and then we would all know He's there, and then we could all use our lovely free will to decide whether we want to follow Him or not. But at least we would be making that judgment and that decision from a position of knowledge rather than a position of wishful thinking or guesswork. And as you say, it doesn't follow at all that accepting that God exists automatically becomes following Him. I mean, I would want to sit down with God and say, "What slavery? What were you thinking? The flood. What were you thinking about? Are you insane? Were you high the day you wrote the Deuteronomy sexual morality laws? What is up with that?" And I would want an explanation. And if there was a sufficient explanation that I thought, okay, yeah, that does make some kind of moral sense, although it's hard to imagine what it would be. Okay, well, then we can start having a discussion about me joining your actual fan club. But until that point, I would just accept that God exists because, okay, that's what the evidence says. But I would still think he was a bit of a, not okay person.
Right, and for me, it comes down to the question of like, is it, if you're not, even if you're not convinced, like for ourselves, like we're not convinced that a God exists, and let's say that hypothetically he does exist, can he justify punishing us for not being convinced that he exists? It's the
Right. Yeah. And that's the core thesis, especially knowing that, it's even worse. Some people say God knows exactly what information and evidence would persuade me. And that's true. And atheists have been making that argument for many years. But something you don't hear too often is God would also know exactly what evidences would be insufficient to convince us. And those are the ones we've been sent. Right, we've been sent apologists who can barely spell their own names, let alone make a logically sound and valid argument. And God would know that for a reasonable thinking person, these arguments would be insufficient for belief and possibly sufficient for mild comedy, and that's it. So it's even worse than it first seems. God is very, very deeply invested in making sure we are fed a diet of poor arguments and poor evidence, and then wants to set us on fire afterwards for not finding them convincing. It's a setup. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, for me, the worst, the most unconvincing ones are the miracles of Jesus. When you look, when people quote, "Oh, but he healed a blind person, or healed a dying man, or whatever it may be," and I'm like, I don't know. Like, does something being written in a book make it true? No, like
Yeah.
if you have it in writing, if you have it in a book, and you can confirm that these things are accurate, that they match with reality, then yeah, of course you can believe in it, right? Even if you haven't seen, I don't know, some scientific studies on it, but you've seen plenty of evidence of, I don't know, video evidence of it having actually happened, then you can be convinced that it has happened. But if you go with like, oh, if you go to church and you let a pastor do the faith healing thing, then you are going to heal your body. Even when you see current day miracles or faith healing, I've seen so many silly faith healing videos of like
Mm.
with the foot with that grows a little bit, but it's just like, dude, like he just adjusted the leg. That's and
So
people still
ridiculous.
believe it, right?
Yeah.
Like if I were to lose a limb, an arm, and it grew back, that would be quite convincing for me, but I have never seen that before. So, like,
Yeah.
just saying, oh, your child's surgery was successful, therefore, God. No, my child's surgery was successful, Therefore, this is a really good hospital, you know.
Right. Yeah. And it's funny how God only intervenes in the medical conditions that are known to occasionally revert to the mean and sort themselves out. But he never grows back legs that have been, lost in accidents. And there was a website, I don't think it's still there, called godhatesamputees.com. And it was basically making that argument that, yeah, he'll occasionally cause a cancer to go into remission, or, help somebody get over their, persistent bowel irritation, but he'll never grow back a missing arm or a missing leg. So what's he got against amputees? Clearly has a hang up, right?
Or like, hey, super chat. Okay, from Babs Barrett. Five.
Babs is awesome.
Oh, cool stuff. Okay, these are not American dollars. These are pounds. £5. Free will and an omniscient God are mutually exclusive. Yeah, that's a really good point. I was gonna ask you how you feel about free will, because there's even atheists sometimes seem to have sort of different positions on what free will is and what is.
So I'll answer that question, but to just put some flesh on what Babs just sent, she's absolutely right. Because if God knows everything, then on Monday he knows what he's going to do on Friday. When Friday comes, is he capable of changing his mind? Well, he can't, because if he does, then he would have been wrong on Monday when he thought he was going to do the first thing, right? So Babs is absolutely right that free will and a knowledge of all events, omniscience would include a knowledge of all future events, are incompatible and cannot exist in one entity. To answer your question on free will, I suspect that the arguments against the existence of free will are true. I suspect we don't really have free will, and it's some kind of illusion that happens to us. It arises in our subjective experience as a result of the way our minds work. And so we have a very, very, very strong sense that we have free will, but I suspect that it's some sort of illusion, and that we probably don't. And I've just found the arguments of Sam Harris in his book on free will, found it very, very compelling. And Robert Sapolsky has written on free will as well. And I think that that's probably the case. But you still have to live, and we still have to live as if we have free will. Whether we actually have it or not, we all have the subjective feeling of having it, and we all operate in the world as if other agents and other people have it. So in a way, I think it's not quite the interesting question that some people think, or rather the amount of weight on it is perhaps slightly less. Because if I found out today for sure that I don't have free will, I wouldn't do anything differently tomorrow. I'd still need to make breakfast in the morning and attend to my needs and drop my son at school and water the plants and feed the cat and, wash the clothes and do the things. And, you just got to live still, right? So I'm not sure how much of an impact it would really have. But what I often say to people who want to question the idea that belief isn't chosen is I say that whether we have free will or not, it would still be the case that you don't choose what you believe. So even if Sam Harris and Robert Sapolsky are wrong, and there is some incredible way that free will can be real somehow that we just haven't realized yet, even under that reality, it would still be the case that you can only believe something if you find it convincing. And if you don't find it convincing, you cannot believe it.
Right. Adrian Belgrave in the chat says, I believe we do have free will, but God already preordained what is about to come. So it's like 90% God's will. I'm sorry, God's plan, and 10% free will. But then that if your free will is only 10%, then it's not free will. Right? And also for me personally, my view is that free will and God's plan cannot coexist. Because if God has a plan for you, He's not giving you the option to make choices. He already made the choices for you. And if He's giving you the option to make choices, then He couldn't have planned what is to come for you.
Yeah. And if God can create all possible realities, then He can create and He knows the future. He's in control and He knows the future. This is devastating to the idea of of libertarian free will as we normally understand it, because he could create the universe in which in your future you become a circus clown, or he could create the future in which in your future, your career, you become a heart surgeon, and he would know which one of those would involve which outcome, and he would choose to configure reality such that it was one or the other. And once you're on that track, you can't change it. So I don't agree with that. I think it's very difficult to reconcile those things. As we've already established, it's hard to reconcile God's free will for himself with his omnipotence and omniscience, let alone your own.
Correct. Yeah. I was wrong. So Adrian was saying that it was the opposite. It was 90% free will, 10% God's plan. But that also doesn't track, because if God has a plan, then you don't have free will. And if you have free will, then you can't have it pre-written. Super chat, if you could put that up in the on screen. Thank you so much. Babs, again, thank you so much, Babs, for the second super chat, which says, if God needs suffering, he is a demon. If he can do nothing about it, he isn't all powerful. If he could do something about it, but doesn't, he's not benevolent. What is worthy of worship? And I completely agree. That's what I was saying. Like, even if I believe that the God exists, then I can quote exactly that as to why I wouldn't worship the God. I would believe that it exists, but I wouldn't be able to worship it and follow its rules and stuff. I'm like, I don't think I would want to be. I wouldn't be enticed by the promise of this perfect afterlife, because to me the question will be, why did you put me through what I have to go through to get to this point, right? A couple of weeks ago, I was diagnosed with PTSD based on all of my medical trauma, my kids' medical trauma, and other childhood stuff. And it's like, why did I have to go through all of this and have PTSD and trauma and all of these terrible experiences in order to arrive at this perfect afterlife? Like, I cannot trust that you're going to give me a perfect afterlife, for one. And I cannot trust that you're going to be a benevolent God in this afterlife, because you've already shown me that you're not a benevolent God during this life.
He might decide there's some other important lesson you need to learn later, right? And just while you're kicking back and enjoying heaven, he might go, oh, hang on a second. There's this other important thing that AJ needs to learn. So let me now visit another load of agony and pain and suffering and trauma. I think it's pretty poor. And the fact that this all-powerful being needs to be worshipped, it's very Trumpy, isn't it? Like, needs to be adored, needs for its subjects who are, minuscule in power and significance compared to his own glory, apparently. We all have to say it. We all have to say the magic words and tell him how big he is. This is not the behavior of a confident, together agent who's got his business in order and is confidently running reality and feeling good about things. This is the behavior of a sort of insecure boyfriend that you're trying to get your sister to stop dating. Like, this is not aspirational, God. Do better.
For me, the biggest sign that God cannot be benevolent is the suffering of children, before what is called, the age of awakening, or whatever it's called, right? The age of when they were able to tell on their own whether a God exists or not.
And accountability.
Accountability. There you go. Thank you. That was the age of accountability. And so before the age of accountability, if you have a baby who still cannot speak, cannot communicate in any way with their parents, other than like crying, to let them know that they're hungry, for example, but they cannot convey whole thoughts on what God they believe in, and they also cannot reason with whatever information their parents may be telling them. And what parent is telling their 10-week baby about God? Like, it's generally not them. But the fact that those children, those babies, let's say, are punished with congenital heart defects and open heart surgeries and childhood cancer and starvation and abuse at the hands of the parents or the family members. I cannot fathom a God that will say that is okay because your parents did a bad thing or because
Yeah.
Adam and Eve did a bad thing. Like I would personally not punish my child for my mother's behaviors, right? And it is the same way for me with a God. I cannot fathom a God that is benevolent who can put up with that, who can say it's fine to punish these babies because reasons.
Yeah. And then, by the way, let's not forget that the Bible contradicts itself, because in Ezekiel 18:20, it says that a person who sins shall die and a child shall not suffer for the iniquity of a parent, or a parent for the iniquity of a child. So it's all over the place. It's not only is it immoral, it's also inconsistent.
It absolutely is inconsistent. I mean, the Bible is one of those books that is totally inconsistent within itself. If you look at the Bible itself without looking at anything outside of the Bible, it doesn't make sense. It's not reasonable. So yeah.
Reasonably
Um,
well. I don't think that we've said. I mean, I genuinely don't think that we've said anything that anyone could legitimately argue against. I know people think they can. People always have an argument for everything. The question is it a good argument? And in my experience, I've never heard any. I've been waiting for a proper response to these, questions of suffering of humans and animals for years, and all I hear are the same fallacious arguments about, oh, it's soul building, or it's part of God's plan and he's going to kiss it all better later, or he needed to do it, or it's because of the fall, or all of these things are insufficient, and they don't hold up when you apply just a little bit of critical thinking to them. They just crumble like dust, like something made of dust. They just crumble. And I think that's really, really telling. It suggests a real problem with the ethics of this whole system of imagining that there's an all-powerful being invigilating every moment on Earth, and he's really, really good, but there's all this suffering, and we're just going to stop thinking about how to square those two things because it's a bit hard work, and so we're going to make some noises with our face and pretend we've actually answered it, but they don't. They never